I want to share with you about an Old Testament character called Nehemiah. And you might know a little bit about Nehemiah, or you might know nothing about Nehemiah. So let me tell you a little bit, just a glimpse of who this character Nehemiah was. First of all, let's put the setting into place. Nehemiah was in place during the reign of a Persian king called Artaxerxes. And Persia had taken over, as it were, as a global entity from the Babylonians, who were the original people that took the people of God into exile. Now Persia reigned. Artaxerxes was the king. Nehemiah actually was his wine servant, or his cupbearer, or his waiter, if you like. At that particular time too, there were three major prophets that you'll be familiar with, I'm sure. The prophet Malachi, prophet Zechariah, and the prophet Haggai all spoke into Nehemiah's context. There were four people then who were mainly the key individuals at this time, three aside from Nehemiah. First was a man called Zerubbabel. Zerubbabel led back the first cohort, if you like, of Hebrews from exile in Persia back to Jerusalem. Then there was Queen Esther, who some of you will be very familiar with as well. She was married to one of the kings of Persia, not Artaxerxes, but a previous one called Xerxes or Ahasuerus. And then we have Ezra and Nehemiah. And Ezra and Nehemiah are the two that I wanted to focus in on with you this morning. And I hope you take encouragement from this. Let me tell you a bit about Ezra and a little bit about Nehemiah and why I want to look at these two individual characters. Ezra has a book named after him as well. He was a very holy man, a very pious man. In fact, Ezra was a priest, not just an ordinary priest, but his lineage or his descendants, he went right the way back to the Mosaic era of Aaron, came up through the high priest Zadok in the Davidic area, and he could trace his priestly lines right the way back. So that made him a very holy man. Not only was he a priest, but he was also a scribe. And the scribes were very, very well respected in ancient days. They were the learned ones in particular, and they taught very much Torah and the teachings of Jehovah God. So generationally, Ezra was extremely well qualified as a priest, but his calling, if you like, then was to be a scribe. And most of his book and most of what he does focuses in on the holy temple of God in Jerusalem. Artaxerxes, the king, had allowed Ezra to return to Jerusalem. He took back with him at that stage tens of thousands of the Hebrews at the time, and many, many of them then in a huge cohort all went back to Jerusalem. And a main focus and calling of his was to bring back and restore some sort of religious reform within Jerusalem. Jerusalem being the city of David, Jerusalem being the holy place of God. So he was a very, very pious man. The sages and many, many of the rabbis throughout ages have all referred back to Ezra, and they all refer back to him as saying he was the man who instigated putting back the scriptures, the Tanakh as it's called in Hebrew, the Torah, back into the lives of the people and turning them back to Jehovah. And so he is set up as being a very, very holy man. Then we've got Nehemiah. Nehemiah was a waiter. Nehemiah was a servant. He served the king, as I've said already, Artaxerxes, his wine. He tasted it from the very, very beginning. And throughout the life of Nehemiah, we see this in his book, he then becomes from a waiter transformed into a construction worker. And he also becomes an administrator, and he does various other things and dabbles in politics a little as well. But he sees Jehovah's calling on his life to go back and to do what? Not something all that holy. He was to go back and just build the walls of protection around the city of Jerusalem. Some people might look upon Nehemiah as being an unholy person. That was until we look at his prayer. Let me read it for you in Nehemiah chapter 1. This is how he prays. He prays, I pray, Jehovah God of heaven, O great and awesome God, you who keep your covenant and mercy with those who love you and observe your commandments. Please let your ear be attentive and your eyes open, that you may hear the prayer of your servant, which I pray before you now, day and night, for the children of Israel your servants, and confess the sins of the children of Israel, which we have sinned against you. Both my father's house and I have sinned. We have acted very corruptly against you, and have not kept the commandments, the statutes, nor the ordinances which you commanded your servant Moses. Remember, I pray, the word that you commanded your servant Moses, saying, if you are faithful, I will scatter you amongst the nations. But if you return to me and keep my commandments and do them, though some of you are cast out to the farthest part of the heavens, yet I will gather them from there and bring them to the place which I have chosen as a dwelling for my name. Now, these are your servants and your people, whom you have redeemed by your great power and by your strong hand. O Lord, I pray, please let your ear be attentive to the prayer of your servant and to the prayer of your servants who desire to fear your name. And let your servant prosper this day, I pray, and grant him mercy in the sight of this man. For I was the king's cupbearer, he finishes with. An unholy man in many people's eyes, but a very holy man in God's eyes. God specially chose him to lead the people back, to build Jerusalem's walls back again. It was the same God who called both Ezra and Nehemiah, and one might be looked upon as being a holy person and one not. One who was a scribe, one who was in full-time employment, if you like, for God, and yet the other a construction worker, an administrator, a servant. And people look upon him as being unholy, and yet our God, I believe, says that all of us are unique in our calling, are special, and are equal. No difference. And our callings dictate what we should do to this holy God, no matter what it is that we do. I hope whatever you do in life, you're encouraged from this man, Nehemiah, an ordinary waiter, cupbearer, wine taster, if you like, who God used magnificently.